Who was the one whose body was stolen in the dead of night and secretly cremated in the desert, like a pagan ritual? Who was the one found dead in a Parisian bathtub? Heart stopped amidst unread poems and fading hallucinations? Who choked to death on the very sound they created, a gurgling, silent demise? Forever silenced after waking the world with a blazing guitar? These aren't stories of fame. These are unsolved cases, with no culprits, only victims who pulled the trigger themselves, with morphine, heroin, alcohol, and a loneliness the spotlight never reached. Imagine a tall rock singer, wild-eyed, drunk in the Florida night, holding a gun, opening the back door of a Cadillac, and yelling into the darkness. David Crosby wasn't just a folk rock icon, he was the living embodiment of an internal war heroine always won. At one point, he turned his home into a drug den, simultaneously possessing guitars, syringes, and a revolver. He didn't die, but he witnessed himself disintegrate bit by bit, every liver cell, every nerve drained by crack cocaine. Was surviving truly the greatest curse? And Keith Moon, England's wildest drummer, was his death truly from anti-alcohol pills? Or was that just the final lid on an emotional bomb that had exploded long ago? Keith once drove a car into a hotel swimming pool while drunk, shot at TVs, swallowed handfuls of pills like candy. When his private chauffeur died during a chaotic party, Keith was never truly himself again. And in the end, he died in a rented apartment, surrounded by sedatives and empty liquor bottles, in a desperate attempt to become normal. What about a country rock singer, handsome, calm, southern aristocratic, who died alone in a hotel room from morphine? Graham Parsons didn't die normally. His body was stolen from the airport by a close friend, driven straight into the Joshua Tree Desert, and cremated with gasoline, exactly as they had vowed. No coffin, no burial, no church. A funeral by fire, where his body blazed amidst red rocks, the smell of burning flesh mingling with sorrowful country tunes from a portable cassette player. A mesmerizing ritual, or the final act of a soul yearning to be freed from humanity? What about Jimi Hendrix? How many sounds died with him that fateful night? The official story says he choked on his own vomit in his sleep, but the sleeping pills, the gin glasses, and the whispers among the women around him tell a different tale. A poor black man. From the army to Harlem nightclubs, then becoming Woodstock's guitar god, but what lay behind that aura? It was LSD making him see snakes crawling in his guitar strings. It was heroin making his fingers lose control. It was a heart unable to synchronize with the mundane world. And then there's Jim Morrison, who wrote poetry with liquor, singing songs like apocalyptic prophecies. Jim's death was like an endless play. He went to Paris, stayed with Pamela Corson, a fellow addict and girlfriend, and died suddenly in a bathtub. No autopsy. No cameras. No evidence. Just a cold body, a silent apartment, and an unfinished poem. Some say he died of heroin. Some say he faked his death. Some even believe he was murdered. But does the truth still matter when the myth has been woven so tightly no one dares unravel it? 5 individuals. 5 voices. 5 lives crushed by the very world they built. They weren't just addicted to drugs. They were addicted to the audience, to the lights, to the feeling of living beyond boundaries. They were the ones who shattered the image of the clean artist. They brought chaos to the stage, transforming pain into melody. And in the end, they paid the price. Some died fast. Some died slow. Some still live, but in the shell of someone who once existed. Do you dare to read their entire lives, every needle mark, every blackout drunk, every sleepless night by the toilet, and the faint strumming of a guitar? Do you dare to peer into the past of the music you love, where light never comes with purity? Not every hit song has a happy ending. Not every hero dies on the battlefield, some die in small apartments. In dirty bathrooms, amidst empty beer cans and scattered pill bottles. Welcome to the final stage, where drugs are props, and death is the only applause left. Jim Morrison, the poet in the cold bathtub. Paris, July 1971. The city drowsed in midsummer, a velvet shroud of heat hanging heavy over its ancient stones. But on the third floor of a small apartment building on Rue Beautreillis, a profound silence reigned, a silence so absolute it seemed to guard a secret no one dared touch. A forbidden truth buried deep within the heart of the City of Lights. Inside, within the porcelain embrace of a cold bathtub, a man lay utterly motionless. There were no visible wounds. No telltale sounds of struggle or despair, only the still, cool water and the lifeless form of a poet, Jim Morrison, just 27 years old, the enigmatic frontman of The Doors. The self-proclaimed Lizard King of American rock. The scene was devoid of drama, yet thick with an unspoken finality. A grim tableau signaling the abrupt end of a life lived on the very edge of sanity and sensation. The Sleepless Wanderer. Jim Morrison entered the world in 1943 in Melbourne, Florida. A place of sun and transient beauty, yet his early life bore little resemblance to such idyllic notions. He was the son of a stern naval officer, George Stephen Morrison. A man whose rigid discipline clashed irrevocably with Jim's burgeoning artistic spirit. His mother, Clara Clark Morrison, remained a faint presence in his biographical accounts. Almost as indistinct as erased pages from a history book, an early indicator of the emotional detachment that would plague his adult relationships. From a tender age, Jim displayed the unsettling hallmarks of an unusual mind, a prodigious memory that devoured volumes of information, allowing him to quote philosophers and poets with astonishing recall even as a child. He was reading complex philosophical texts by the age of 10, a solitary pursuit that set him apart from his peers. But beyond the intellect, there was a strange, almost morbid fascination with death. He often recounted a childhood memory, a haunting vignette from his early years. Witnessing a horrific truck accident that crushed and killed a group of Native Americans. This vivid, traumatic image of crying souls in the desert clung to him relentlessly throughout his life. Seeping into the very fabric of his poetry, echoing in his music, and distorting his dreams, often choked by the insidious influence of LSD. This early encounter with mortality, raw and unadorned, seemed to carve a permanent fissure in his psyche, leaving him forever tethered to the darker, more primal aspects of existence. In the early 1960s, a restless and intellectually charged Jim migrated to Los Angeles, enrolling at UCLA to study film. It was there, amidst the flickering lights of projection rooms and the heady discussions of artistic rebellion, that destiny intervened. He crossed paths with Ray Manzarek, a jazz-loving organ student whose intellectual curiosity and musical prowess would later form the very musical soul of The Doors. Their shared vision, a fusion of poetry and rock, began to take shape. Soon after, they were joined by Robbie Krieger on guitar, whose flamenco-infused blues stylings added an exotic texture, and John Densmore on drums, whose precise, jazz-influenced rhythms provided the bedrock. Together, they forged the band named The Doors, a moniker famously inspired by Aldous Huxley's seminal work, The Doors of Perception. This book explored the expansion of consciousness through the use of mescaline and other hallucinogens, a theme that would become tragically central to the band's ethos and Morrison's own life. The Doors were an anomaly, a stark deviation from the burgeoning rock landscape of their era. Their music wasn't merely catchy tunes, it was a visceral, intellectual experience, a potent brew of raw blues power, surreal poetry, the stark nihilism of Nietzschean philosophy, and the mind-bending influence of acid. Jim Morrison wasn't just a vocalist. He was a performance artist, a prophet, a shaman. He didn't simply sing, he recited poetry with a guttural intensity, screamed primal warnings, and danced like a man possessed. his movements erratic and hypnotic. Each live performance transcended a mere concert. It was a ritual, an unfolding drama where the boundaries between performer and audience dissolved. Every song was more than a composition, it was a prophecy, a glimpse into the fractured psyche of a generation struggling with identity and meaning. Tracks like Break On Through, The End, When the Music's Over, and Riders on the Storm weren't just hit singles, they were sacred anthems for a generation adrift, lost in the cultural upheaval of the late 60s. Seeking answers in the dark corners of their own minds. From 1967 to 1970, the Doors soared, becoming a global phenomenon, their music resonating with millions. Yet, as with any celestial ascent, the brighter the lights of fame shone, the deeper and more menacing the shadows grew. And Morrison's shadows had names, distinct and destructive: hard liquor consumed in staggering quantities, the mind-altering abyss of LSD, the numbing embrace of barbiturates, the seductive whisper of heroin, and a chilling, ever-present obsession with death. These were not mere vices. They were his constant companions, each one pulling him further away from the reality he found increasingly unbearable. The unwritten poem, Drugs, Hallucinations, and Death in Paris. Jim Morrison wasn't a man who confined his addictions to a single substance. He wasn't simply a drinker, or a user of one drug. He was, in a more profound and disturbing sense, addicted to all of them, addicted to the very sensation of vanishing from reality, addicted to the swirling, destructive allure of chaos itself. Each night became a descent. He would drink from the moment the sun dipped below the horizon until the first faint blush of dawn, chain-smoking weed as if it were sustenance, swallowing acid tabs like daily vitamins. And occasionally, when the gnawing pain of existence wasn't enough, he would seek out heroin. It wasn't born of a specific preference for the drug, but rather from a desperate, terrifying curiosity. He didn't know what he felt anymore, and heroin promised to either amplify or erase whatever sensations remained. He was a living experiment, a walking testament to the human capacity for self-destruction. Friends and associates who witnessed his spiraling descent often described him as a living ghost. He would wander aimlessly through rooms, his eyes unfocused, his once vibrant hair now a tangled, unkempt bird's nest. His eyes, once fiery with intellectual curiosity, were now hazy, devoid of true focus. His mouth would mumble snatches of Baudelaire's poetry intertwined with fragments of unfinished lyrics, a discordant symphony of genius and decay. Some nights, he would lie motionless on the floor for hours, lost in a trance, listening intently to the rhythmic drip of a leaky faucet, convinced it was the whispers from another realm, a secret language meant only for him. He was losing his grip on the concrete world, adrift in a sea of internal voices and manufactured realities. By 1969, the meticulously constructed facade of his public persona began to crumble spectacularly. The infamous incident in Miami served as a grim turning point. A drunken Jim, fueled by alcohol and a simmering contempt for authority, stripped off his shirt on stage, hurled obscenities at the audience, branding them slaves of consumerism, and was subsequently arrested for lewd and lascivious behavior in public. The scandal sent shockwaves through the music industry. The incident led to the Doors being banned from performing in numerous venues across the country, Morrison facing a humiliating trial, and his public image irrevocably tarnished, transforming him from a symbol of rock and roll freedom into a terrifying, erratic alcoholic. The myth began to devour the man. His artistic career, once his primary focus, began to recede, a distant echo. Morrison found himself increasingly drawn to poetry over music, dedicating his dwindling energy to crafting stark, unsettling verses. He self-published short, obscure collections like The Lords and the New Creatures and An American Prayer, works that were haunting, profoundly ambiguous, and often drenched in a primal, almost bloody imagery. While the Doors were in the midst of recording their final, critically acclaimed album, LA Woman, Morrison, seeking a final, desperate escape, decided to flee to Paris. He embarked on this journey with his longtime lover, Pamela Corson, ostensibly to find himself and to dedicate himself solely to his writing. Yet, Paris, the legendary city of artists and lovers, did not offer the illumination he desperately sought. Instead of finding light, the romanticized cityscape became his graveyard. Morrison spent the majority of his remaining days wandering aimlessly through the melancholic grandeur of Père Lachaise Cemetery, a morbid pilgrimage among the illustrious dead. He would read voraciously, absorbing the works of his literary heroes, while simultaneously succumbing to the city's darker temptations. He drank copious amounts of absinthe, its hallucinogenic properties mirroring his internal disquiet, and sought out opium from obscure Moroccan cafes, chasing the elusive dragons of altered consciousness. Pamela, equally entangled in the web of heroin addiction, became not just his lover, but his complicit companion and ultimately, his enabler. Their apartment at number 17, Rue Boutriellis, a seemingly innocuous address in a quiet neighborhood, transformed into a squalid den, a suffocating space where fragmented poetry, the insidious rituals of drug use, and bitter, escalating arguments echoed through the long, Parisian nights. It was a self-imposed prison, a final, desperate attempt to outrun the demons that had followed him across the Atlantic. The bathtub, no autopsy, and unanswered questions. The morning of July 3, 1971, shattered the precarious calm of Rue Boutriellis. Pamela Corson made a frantic phone call to a mutual friend, announcing with chilling brevity that Morrison was dead in the bathtub. The details surrounding his final moments remained shrouded in a thick fog of ambiguity and unanswered questions. No one claimed to have heard a cry for help, a desperate gasp for air. No one truly knew how long he had been lying there, submerged in the cold water, his life ebbing away unnoticed. Crucially, and perhaps most damningly, no forensic pathologist was called to the scene. There was no official autopsy performed. A decision that would forever fuel a maelstrom of conspiracy theories and suspicions. The official cause of death, hastily scribbled on the death certificate, was heart failure. But what kind of heart dies so suddenly, so inexplicably, when no substances in the blood were ever analyzed, when the true chemical cocktail coursing through his veins remained a mystery? The void left by the lack of official investigation was quickly filled by a multitude of theories, each more tantalizing and unsettling than the last. Some whispered that Morrison died of a massive heroin overdose, a particularly potent strain he tragically mistook for cocaine, consumed in the cramped, grimy toilet of a Parisian nightclub. His final, desperate high leading to immediate cardiac arrest. Others clung to the belief that he had, in a moment of profound despair, committed suicide, seeking a permanent escape from the relentless pressures of fame and the suffocating grip of his addictions. There's also a harrowing theory suggesting that Pamela, herself deeply intoxicated, may have accidentally administered a fatal overdose in a haze of drug-induced confusion. And then, there are the more extreme, almost mythological beliefs that he didn't truly die, but rather faked his death to escape the suffocating embrace of fame, vanishing into anonymity somewhere in Morocco, living out his days as an ascetic poet, forever free from the public's insatiable gaze. Whatever the elusive truth, the subsequent events unfolded with a peculiar, almost indecent haste. The funeral took place quickly, quietly. A clandestine affair designed to minimize public attention and avoid the morbid circus that would inevitably follow. Jim Morrison was laid to rest in the hallowed grounds of Père Lachaise Cemetery. Nestled amongst the very poets he had so profoundly admired, Oscar Wilde, Apollinaire, Molière. His grave, initially, bore no name, no photograph, a silent marker in a sea of ornate tombstones. Over time, it became a pilgrimage site, adorned only by the humble tributes of devoted fans from around the world, wild grass growing untamed, countless cigarette butts, and scattered empty beer cans, a stark, poignant reflection of the chaotic life he had led. Tragically, the story of Pamela Corson, his enigmatic lover, mirrored his own dark trajectory. She too succumbed to the same insidious forces, dying just 3 years later, also of a heroin overdose, at the identical, cursed age of 27. Her death only deepened the mystery surrounding Morrison's final days, further cementing the tragic intertwining of their fates. The legacy, when myth replaces truth. Since that fateful summer in 1971, Jim Morrison has transcended mortality, transforming from a troubled artist into an enduring legend. Millions of devotees from every corner of the globe undertake annual pilgrimages to his humble grave, seeking a connection to the rebellious spirit that still resonates through his music. His previously unreleased recordings, his haunting, unprinted poems, and even his drunken audio tapes, once considered mere ephemera, have been reissued endlessly, each new release fueling the insatiable hunger for more. The Doors, after a brief hiatus, found their way back onto the charts, their music now infused with the tragic mystique of their fallen leader. And Morrison, the man who once trembled in the squalid toilet of a Sunset Strip club, haunted by his own demons, is now revered as a veritable rock and roll martyr. A tragic hero whose self-destruction only added to his enigmatic appeal. Yet, there is an unsettling, almost unfair irony in this posthumous deification. Morrison, in his tormented existence, perhaps never truly desired to be an icon, a symbol for millions. He simply wanted to write poetry, to experience love, to drink deeply from the well of life, and ultimately, to die quietly, without fanfare or public scrutiny. But the world, with its insatiable appetite for heroes and legends, would not allow him that solace. The world demanded a myth, and when it could not create one organically, it would readily sacrifice a real person to construct the grand narrative of a tragic god. His death was not merely the end of a life, it was the birth of a legend, a process that stripped away the complex, flawed human being and replaced him with an idealized, yet ultimately hollow archetype. What, then, was Jim Morrison truly addicted to? It wasn't simply the physical dependence on drugs or alcohol. His addiction ran far deeper, touching the very core of his being. He was, in essence, addicted to self-destruction. He once penned a chilling line in his journal, a profound confession that illuminates his darkest impulses: "I don't fear death. I fear not having feelings. And I will use every means to keep feelings alive." This desperate pursuit of intense sensation, of raw, unfiltered emotion, became his ultimate drug, overriding all reason, all caution. The unbearable price of those feelings, of that relentless pursuit of heightened experience, was a cold bathtub, a lonely Parisian apartment, no final words of farewell, and a name forever etched into the infamous 27 Club, a macabre fraternity of brilliant artists who died tragically young, often in profound solitude, their lives consumed by the very passions that fueled their art. The final curtain fell, not on a grand stage, but in a small, quiet bathroom, leaving behind a legacy that continues to haunt and inspire, a testament to the intoxicating allure and destructive power of living on the edge. What do you believe was the true nature of Jim Morrison's addiction, and how did it shape his ultimate fate? Jimi Hendrix, when the notes became the drug. The Purple Haze Cyclone. There are souls born to disrupt the world's order, and Jimi Hendrix was undeniably one of them. With hair like a sacred bonfire, robes shimmering like celestial bodies, and a Fender Stratocaster held close as a lover, Jimi stepped into the 1960s as a god of electric sound. A musician with no true home beyond the galactic sprawl of pure audio. He wasn't just a guitarist, he was a conduit, a shaman of the fretboard, pulling sounds from the ether that no one had ever dared to imagine. His presence was a whirlwind, a force of nature that tore through the stagnant air of conventional music. leaving a trail of awe and confusion in its wake. Born in 1942 in Seattle, a city then more known for rain and industry than for fostering musical revolutionaries, Jimmy's childhood was a barren landscape of poverty, instability, and the jarring cacophony of parental arguments and domestic violence. The street corners and the dingy rooms of his youth offered little solace, but in the chaos, a singular escape route emerged: music. It began humbly, with a ukulele, a single string stretched taut. An early, crude attempt to coax melody from silence. Then came the succession of battered, second-hand electric guitars, their voices warped and thin, but in Jimmy's hands long, powerful. And imbued with an innate rhythm, they transformed into instruments of pure magic. When Hendrix held a guitar, the world around him held its breath, waiting for the sonic explosion that inevitably followed. It was more than practice, it was an act of communion, a desperate search for order within the chaos of his existence. He didn't just play. He conversed with the instrument, a dialogue of raw emotion and blistering innovation. His ascent to global phenomenon was cemented by that incendiary performance at the Monterey Pop Festival in 1967, a moment simultaneously sacred and savage. There, amidst the flower power idealism, Hendrix unleashed a primal scream of feedback and distortion, culminating in the ritualistic sacrifice of his guitar, doused in lighter fluid and set ablaze. It was an act of artistic defiance, a blazing declaration that he was here to tear down the walls of expectation. Audiences watched, mesmerized, and slightly terrified, as he coaxed unearthly shrieks from his instrument using his teeth, played behind his back with acrobatic flair, and unleashed ghostly howls from his overdriven amplifiers. People didn't know if they were witnessing an artist or a sorcerer, a musician or a demigod. His live shows were less concerts and more spiritual awakenings, each note a prayer, each feedback squeal a sermon. Yet, few knew that behind that blinding aura, a soul was burning out, consumed day by the insidious twin flames of drugs and profound loneliness. The spotlight, for all its intensity, could not illuminate the gaping void within. It simply amplified it, projecting his inner turmoil onto a global stage, cloaked in the guise of rock and roll transcendence. Hard liquor, sleeping pills, and a dream that never awoke. Hendrix didn't start with heroin. His initiation into the labyrinth of altered states began with the more conventional companions of the music scene: alcohol and cannabis. These were the social lubricants, the mild sedatives that promised a fleeting reprieve from the pressures of touring and the incessant demands of an ever-growing fame. But as the music grew more intense, the touring schedule more relentless, and his mind increasingly craved an escape from the stark realities of his existence, Jimmy delved deeper into the pharmacological rabbit hole. LSD became a key, unlocking doors of perception that promised limitless creative vistas but often led to terrifying, hallucinatory labyrinths. Barbiturates offered a cruel illusion of calm, a way to quiet the screaming cacophony in his head before their grip tightened. And eventually, the siren song of morphine beckoned, a dangerous embrace that promised oblivion. He once mused, music should open up doors to the imagination, and I need something to push that door harder. This was not merely a recreational pursuit. It was a desperate quest for heightened sensation, for a deeper connection to the cosmic forces he believed permeated his sound. The drugs became an extension of his instrument, another means to manipulate reality, to reach a new plane of existence where the music truly lived. There was one particular night in New York in 1969, etched into the collective memory of his inner circle, a harrowing descent into the abyss. In a small apartment on the 30th floor of the Chelsea Hotel, Jimmy stared unblinkingly into a mirror. His eyes already bloodshot and dilated from a cocktail of LSD and a dozen Quaaludes, a notorious sedative affectionately known among musicians as the drug golf ball in a party. For hours that followed, he was incapacitated. Speech failed him. movement was impossible. His very identity seemed to unravel, forgotten amidst the chemical fog. He simply sat there, a ghost of his former self, laughing at his own reflection, as if playing a distorted, silent solo with his own mind in a space where time had ceased to exist. The boundaries between his physical self and the universe dissolved, leaving him adrift in a private, terrifying symphony of consciousness. Friends recounted another chilling episode. A morbidly curious act of self-experimentation that only those drawn into the vortex of addiction could comprehend. Hendrix, they claimed, once swallowed an entire box of Mandrax, a powerful tranquilizer, simply to see what would happen. It was a bizarre, suicidal test of limits. A perverse exploration of the edges of consciousness and oblivion. He was later found in a nightclub bathroom, his body turning a ghastly purple, his breathing shallow and faint as a whisper of wind. Yet, when he was being wheeled out on a stretcher to an ambulance, Jimmy still managed a faint smile, asking the paramedics, "Do you hear the ocean waves?" It was a moment of profound, unsettling beauty amidst the horror, a glimpse into the fractured reality he inhabited, where the mundane world blurred with the psychedelic landscapes of his mind. The line between genius and madness, between reality and illusion, had become impossibly thin. A witness from his touring entourage recalled seeing Jimmy, with chilling nonchalance, mix LSD into dark rum, then stir it with powdered heroin using a silver spoon, drinking it down like a casual fruit juice. It was a macabre ritual, a testament to the reckless abandon with which he approached both his art and his self-destruction. A sound engineer vividly remembered a 3 a.m. recording session. When Jimmy walked into the studio with 2 young women and a container filled with small, colored paper squares, potent, officially unscheduled LSD. He put one tab on his tongue, then another. When I looked back, he had taped a 6th tab to his forehead, claiming he wanted to hear music with his third eye. Such nights were not uncommon. They were the crucible in which his revolutionary sounds were forged, but also the fires that consumed him. The studio, meant to be a sanctuary of creativity, often became a darkroom for his escalating self-abuse. On one occasion, after a particularly explosive show in Los Angeles, Hendrix was found unconscious in his limousine, his collar soaked with blood from vomiting during convulsions. The police arrived, and instead of making an arrest, they merely sighed, a familiar weariness in their eyes, and called for his regular doctor. "He's a national treasure," one officer whispered, a strange mixture of exasperation and reverence in his voice. But no one asked the obvious question: which nation preserves its treasures with morphine and complicit silence? The unspoken understanding was that Jimi Hendrix, in his fragile, drug-addled state, was too important to be subjected to the mundane realities of the law. He existed in a realm above, protected by his genius, even as that genius drove him to the brink. Hendrix's brushes with the law were rare, a testament to his protected status. He was arrested in Toronto in 1969 for possession of heroin and hashish, a charge that, for an ordinary citizen, would have meant serious consequences. But instead of facing prosecution, he was swiftly released, thanks to the powerful legal team assembled by his record label, who argued that the drugs had been planted in his luggage by an unknown assailant. The truth? Some within the band whispered that Jimmy had purchased them at a store in Harlem just days before. But justice and artists at the pinnacle of fame, they rarely intersect. The scales were perpetually tipped in favor of the myth, even if it meant distorting the grim reality. The incident only served to reinforce his sense of invincibility, a dangerous illusion that his fame would always shield him from the consequences of his actions. There were rumors, never confirmed, yet persistent, that Hendrix had once attempted suicide after a prolonged, 7-day drug binge, during which he neither slept nor ate, subsisting only on liquor, pills, and the electronic music blasting in his headphones. His manager at the time reportedly had to break down the door to his recording studio to find him, sprawled on the floor. A handful of sedatives still clutched in his mouth, a notebook lying beside him with a single, scrawled line, "Sound is the universe. And I am lost." It was a cry for help. A desperate signal from a soul adrift in a sea of his own making, but perhaps a cry that went unheard, or simply too late. This chilling anecdote, whether fact or urban legend, speaks volumes about the depths of his despair, the profound loneliness that haunted him despite the adoration of millions. The universe of sound he had created, the very thing that defined him, had become a labyrinth in which he was hopelessly trapped. The Ascension and the Fall. Jimi Hendrix's death in 1970 was not merely the end of a brilliant career, it was the tragic punctuation mark on a soul perpetually yearning to transcend its physical form. He passed away at the tender age of 27 in a hotel in London, his lungs filled with vomit, his mouth tasting of red wine, and his system saturated with the lingering traces of sleeping pills. A death shrouded in ambiguity, leaving behind a chilling void and endless speculation. Was it an accident, a desperate suicide, or a grim twist of fate? The official story, while accepted by the authorities, left a lingering, unsettling chill in the hearts of those who knew him and those who adored his music. There's a chilling hypothesis, whispered in hushed tones, that he was murdered by his manager, a calculated act to profit from a life insurance policy, a cold, calculated betrayal of the trust he had placed in those around him. Others believe it was the final, desperate act of a man who felt his music could no longer save him, a surrender to the overwhelming forces that had consumed his mind and body. Perhaps he had finally reached the limits of his creative and emotional endurance, and saw no other escape from the relentless pressures and internal demons that plagued him. But there are also those who speak very softly, with a kind of reverent sorrow, that Hendrix didn't truly die. He simply dissolved into his final guitar note. A moment of ultimate transcendence where man and drug, light and shadow, life and death, all merged into a single, breathtaking, and ultimately tragic, cosmic chord. His spirit, they believe, became one with the vibrations he created, a ghostly echo still resonating through the fabric of the universe. The legacy of Jimi Hendrix is a complex tapestry woven with threads of unprecedented musical genius, profound artistic expression, and the dark, corrosive stains of addiction and self-destruction. His story serves as a stark reminder that even the most brilliant lights can be extinguished by the shadows they create, and that the pursuit of ultimate sensation, whether through sound or substance, can lead to an irreversible, devastating fall. He chased the purple haze until it consumed him, a prophet of sound silence too soon, leaving behind a haunting symphony of unanswered questions and a world forever changed by his brief, explosive presence. What do you think was the true cause of his passing? Do you believe his death was an accident, or something more? Absolutely. Here's the English translation of the expanded text about David Crosby, maintaining the detective noir tone you've requested. David Crosby, the shadow legend in the maelstrom of addiction. A life of transformations and paradoxical paths. David Crosby, born in 1941 in Los Angeles. That gilded city of dreams and the lingering shadows of Hollywood, etched his name as one of the most influential artists of the 60s and 70s. He wasn't just a founding member of the Byrds, a band that pioneered the folk rock sound, but also an indispensable part of the legendary supergroup Crosby, Stills and Nash, later Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, an ensemble that virtually defined harmonized rock. Crosby was more than just a talented musician with a distinctive baritone voice and a knack for complex harmonies. He was an icon of rich, harmonized rock, seamlessly blending genres like folk, psychedelic, and rock. His melodies, though sometimes tinged with melancholy, always overflowed with creativity and emotional depth, leaving an indelible mark on music history. He was an architect of sound, A man who used his guitar and voice to construct haunting ballads and timeless anthems for a generation searching for meaning. Yet, behind the dazzling stage lights and a brilliant musical career, David Crosby's life was a tangled, tumultuous narrative, a tragic epic of personal struggle. From his earliest days stepping into the music scene, Crosby revealed the soul of an artist in constant torment, relentlessly seeking new sensations, intense experiences to feed the fire of his creativity. It was in this unceasing quest that the grim reality of addiction became an inseparable part of his journey, a deep, indelible scar in his life story. It lurked like a demon, always ready to devour him, a hidden curse beneath the cloak of genius. Crosby lived a double life, on one side, the revered artist, on the other, a lost soul, wrestling with the very shadows within himself. Early encounters with the devil's dust, the crushing pressure of instant success, the artificial glitter of the music industry, coupled with relentless touring and the inherent loneliness of an artist's life, pushed Crosby towards stimulants as a desperate escape from reality. Initially, he found solace and inspiration in marijuana and LSD, drugs considered fashionable and even spiritually legitimate among artists and seekers of psychedelic enlightenment in the 60s. They were seen as doors leading to the expansion of imagination, a means to explore deeper layers of consciousness, thereby fostering artistic creativity. Crosby believed they helped him transcend conventional barriers, allowing him to perceive music through an entirely new lens, transforming notes into transcendent experiences. All-night jamming sessions, under the influence of LSD, birthed groundbreaking sounds and hallucinatory lyrics, shaping the Byrd's psychedelic rock style. He once recounted how, under the effects of LSD, he felt as though he was conversing with the universe, and musical ideas flowed ceaselessly. But the illusion of spiritual enlightenment quickly dissolved. Before long, Crosby stumbled into heroin, a dark, dangerous drug, a predator lurking in the shadows, waiting for its prey to fall into the trap. His heroin addiction became alarming in the 70s. As he repeatedly lost control in front of the public and his peers, turning concerts and social gatherings into tragic performances of self-destruction. Drugs became an invisible bridge, leading him from the heights of creativity to the abyss of ruin. Crosby's reputation and career were severely impacted by numerous public incidents of drug use, openly and without concealment. Stories circulated within the artist community and the press like grim prophecies, each one a testament to his accelerating downfall. David Crosby snorting heroin in his hotel room all day, refusing to leave, refusing to eat. He forgot song lyrics on stage due to being high, forcing the band to stop mid-song in awkward confusion. Or arrested by police at the airport with drugs in his bag, a humiliating spectacle for a rock icon. These anecdotes transformed Crosby into a notorious symbol of artistic decline. A vivid warning about the dark side of fame, where even the greatest talents can be consumed by the very substances they believe will liberate them. He became a tragic fable, a painful proof that drugs discriminate against no one, no matter how talented. The self-destructive journey with heroin and alcohol. Heroin was more than just a drug. It was the #1 enemy that dragged Crosby into the depths of self-destruction. He frequently plunged into prolonged binges, sometimes lasting weeks, transforming himself into a ghostly figure, constantly in a daze, disoriented. His home, once a sanctuary of music and friendship, became a drug den, littered with syringes and pill bottles, a grim and haunting scene. His physical and mental health deteriorated severely, reflecting an unending internal battle. During many live performances, Crosby had to struggle to maintain sobriety. An unspoken battle waged right there on stage. On numerous occasions, he forgot lyrics, performed without emotion, his voice trembling and off-key, or even abandoned shows midway, leaving a sea of disappointed fans and a band in an awkward predicament. These moments weren't just professional mishaps, they were deep gashes in his soul. Painful reminders of how drugs had stripped him of his talent and professionalism. Crosby's career repeatedly hit rock bottom, contracts were canceled, bands disbanded. All because of his self-destructive habits. He had, in essence, pulled the trigger on himself, destroying what he had painstakingly built. Beyond heroin, alcohol was another indispensable companion in his decadent pursuits. From all-night parties to lonely moments backstage, alcohol became a close friend, a means to fill the void. Coupled with drugs, alcohol became a double-edged weapon that ravaged Crosby's body and mind, turning him from a vibrant artist into a wandering ghost in the showbiz world, a stranger to his own life. His pale skin, glazed eyes, and emaciated physique became Crosby's familiar image during his darkest period. He had utterly annihilated his body and soul. Transformed in tragic loves, David Crosby was renowned not just for his music, but also for his turbulent relationships, which were as tempting as they were damaging. He had many complex connections with beautiful women and fellow artists within the entertainment industry, but most ended in tears and disappointment, leaving behind scars that never fully healed. He seemed incapable of maintaining any stable, lasting relationship, as the specter of addiction always intervened. Close friends, those who witnessed his life up close, revealed that Crosby's relationships were perpetually dominated by his addiction and profound psychological instability. He frequently lost himself in drunken stupors, and prolonged drug binges rendered his romantic relationships and personal life chaotic and shattered. The women who loved him endured considerable pain, watching the man they adored sink into the mire of drugs, becoming distant and unreliable. They tried to save him, but the power of addiction often proved stronger than any love. Crosby loved fiercely, but also destroyed that love with his own hands. There was a period when Crosby was rumored to have had intimate relationships with many powerful figures in the entertainment industry, individuals who not only helped him in his career but also exploited his addiction to manipulate and control him. Rumors of clandestine deals, of handshakes in the dark made in exchange for silence or convenience, added another dark layer to his already complex story. He became a pawn in a power game he was too weak to resist, trapped between his desire for healing and his reliance on those who exploited him. The death of addiction? Though he didn't die prematurely like many other notorious addicts of his era, members of the 27 Club, such as Jimi Hendrix or Jim Morrison, David Crosby was not spared the severe consequences of a life immersed in drugs. His battle was longer, more protracted, but no less brutal. He faced a series of failed rehabilitation attempts, emergency hospitalizations due to deteriorating health, and even served prison time for drug and firearms offenses. Each relapse was a crushing blow to hope, a painful reminder that the demon still lurked. The health problems stemming from long-term drug use forced Crosby to grapple with chronic illnesses for many years. His kidneys were severely damaged, culminating in a liver transplant in 1995. A last-ditch effort to save his life. He even had to confront HIV in his later years, another grim consequence of his unrestrained lifestyle. His body was a battlefield, where every cell fought against the ravages of toxins. Each illness was a reminder of past choices. However, Crosby himself repeatedly affirmed, with a resilient and poignant tone, that he viewed overcoming addiction not as a destination, but as a never-ending journey. He lived with a profound awareness of the fragility of recovery, always knowing that the demon could return. He considered his survival to be his greatest victory in the war against darkness, a testament to his indomitable will and his fervent desire to live a meaningful life. He was not a victim, but a warrior. The comeback and musical legacy. Despite the long, dark months submerged in the shadows of addiction, David Crosby remained an extraordinary artist. He successfully completed rehabilitation multiple times, though with immense difficulty, each return a testament to his extraordinary resolve. He returned to music with his guitar and deeply emotional voice, and produced enduring works that were highly acclaimed both artistically and culturally. His later solo albums, such as Cross, 2014, and Lighthouse, 2016, proved that the creative flame within him had never truly extinguished, even as his body wore down. His music always contained the pain and internal conflict of his own being, the scars from his life, creating a powerful, authentic allure for listeners. They weren't just melodies, they were stories told through sound, painful yet hopeful confessions. Crosby is regarded as a titan of American rock, one of the voices that defined an era. But he is also a vivid testament to the steep price of absolute freedom and unrestrained rebellion. His story serves as a reminder that even if you conquer addiction, its traces will forever cling to you, like a silent warning. David Crosby passed away in January 2023, at the age of 81. But his musical legacy and his tumultuous life story will continue to echo, like a melancholic yet powerful song, a whisper from the shadows about what humans can endure and overcome. Do you think personal suffering is a necessary component for creating great art, or is it merely a destructive path? Keith Moon, The Who's legendary drummer and the battle with addiction's shadows. A promising beginning and unbounded rebellion. Keith John Moon entered the world on August 23, 1946, in Wembley, London. A product of a working-class family that could little fathom the chaotic brilliance he would unleash upon the world. From a tender age, it was evident he possessed an extraordinary talent for the drums, a raw, untamed energy, and an inherently rebellious nature. Moon wasn't merely a skilled percussionist, he was a revolutionary. An architect of rhythm who crafted a drumming style previously unheard of, innovative, chaotic, and utterly groundbreaking. His fills were not merely rhythmic punctuation, they were explosions. Cascades of sound that defied convention and propelled The Who's music into a stratosphere of its own. He approached the kit like a mad scientist, experimenting with every beat, every cymbal crash, transforming it into an extension of his own volatile spirit. His early performances were a visceral hint of the madness to come, a prelude to the relentless, thunderous assault that would become his signature. Yet, from his very first steps into the music scene, Moon was swiftly drawn into the turbulent maelstrom of the mad artist lifestyle, a defining characteristic of the 60s and 70s. The endless parties, the river of alcohol, the allure of stimulants, these gradually became an inseparable part of his existence. It was less a choice and more an inevitability, a siren song that beckoned him deeper into a world where excess was celebrated as a badge of honor. The thrill of fame, the constant rush of adrenaline from performing, only amplified his predisposition for extremes. He embraced the chaos, perhaps even craved it. As if only through utter abandon could he truly feel alive. Moon joined The Who in 1964, a pivotal moment that cemented his destiny. He quickly became an irreplaceable member of the band, a vital, pulsating heart that drove their sound. From those early days, his rebellion didn't just shake the stages he played on, it reverberated through the very foundations of the backstage world. He wasn't merely a musician, he was an icon of unbridled indulgence and limitless destruction, a force of nature in human form. His stage presence was a spectacle of flailing limbs and wild-eyed abandon, often culminating in the literal destruction of his drum kit. This wasn't just showmanship. It was an extension of his personality, a physical manifestation of the internal tempest that raged within him. He was Moon the Loon, a nickname that encapsulated both his genius and his burgeoning madness, making him both adored and feared in equal measure. The onset of addiction, descending into the dark maelstrom. At the zenith of his career, as The Who ascended to become one of the world's premier rock bands. Keith Moon simultaneously began his deep immersion into the insidious underworld of drugs and alcohol. Initially, much like many artists of that era, he dabbled with marijuana, LSD, and amphetamines. Substances used as tools for transcendence, meant to amplify creativity in both music and life. These were the keys to the doors of perception, promising boundless inspiration and heightened sensory experiences. Moon, ever the seeker of extremes, embraced them, believing they unlocked a deeper connection to the chaotic energy that defined his drumming. The psychedelic era, with its ethos of experimentation, provided the perfect backdrop for his burgeoning excesses, blurring the lines between artistic pursuit and self-destruction. However, Moon's indulgence did not halt at these relatively softer substances. His addiction escalated, pulling him deeper into a perilous abyss. He soon began experimenting with cocaine and heroin, dangerous drugs with devastating destructive power. The grip of his addiction became alarming as his self-control eroded, directly impacting his health, mental stability, and career. The once flamboyant energy that captivated audiences began to mutate into erratic behavior, tinged with a dangerous unpredictability. The vibrant spirit was being slowly consumed by the darkness he courted. Friends, bandmates, and family members repeatedly witnessed his alarming plunges into drug-induced stupors, often to the point where he was physically incapacitated, unable to stand or function. There were nights when Moon would vanish without a trace, leaving the band and crew in a frantic search, only to find him in a state of extreme intoxication, sometimes even in drug-induced shock. These were not isolated incidents, they were increasingly frequent episodes that cast a long, grim shadow over his professional commitments and personal relationships. Each disappearance was a terrifying gamble, a flirtation with oblivion, leaving those around him in a perpetual state of dread and despair. The laughter that once defined him became a hollow echo, often replaced by paranoia and aggression. The wild lifestyle and shocking scandals. Keith Moon's notoriety stemmed not only from his unparalleled drumming talent but equally from his outrageous pranks and a chaotic, uncontrollable lifestyle. He became synonymous with the phrase sex, drugs, and rock and roll, embodying its most extreme manifestations. He repeatedly wreaked havoc on hotel rooms, achieving legendary status for his destructive antics. Tales abound of him exploding toilets with explosives, smashing furniture, and notoriously tossing televisions out of windows, often fueled by a volatile cocktail of drugs and alcohol. These weren't mere youthful indiscretions, they were calculated acts of anarchy, a desperate cry for attention or perhaps a twisted form of artistic expression. One of the most infamous incidents involved him blowing up a hotel room by stuffing fireworks inside. The stunt resulted in significant damage to the hotel, further cementing his scandalous reputation within the entertainment industry. The story, recounted with a mix of horror and morbid fascination, served as a grim testament to his escalating recklessness. These weren't just pranks, they were expressions of a mind unraveling, a desperate need to push boundaries until they shattered. Furthermore, during tours, Moon's behavior often spiraled out of control. He would pick fights with fans, intentionally smash stage equipment, and on occasion, abandon performances midway, leaving both the audience and his bandmates in utter bewilderment. The image of an explosive, wild drummer became a legend, a mythologized figure of rock rebellion. But it also created immense difficulties for the band and their crew. They were constantly on edge, never knowing what new chaotic spectacle Moon would unleash. His destructive tendencies often overshadowed his undeniable musical brilliance, creating a complex legacy of both adoration and exasperation. The cost of his wildness extended beyond mere financial damages. it inflicted a heavy toll on the morale and sanity of those closest to him. Turbulent and tragic relationships. Keith Moon's personal life was as volatile as his drumming. He experienced 3 tumultuous marriages, each relationship plagued by the highs and lows. The inherent instability stemming from his wild personality and deepening addiction. His pursuit of love was often overshadowed by his internal demons, turning what should have been havens into battlegrounds. Moon's first marriage was to model Angie D'Angelo at a very young age. However, the union quickly crumbled under the weight of his addictions and increasingly violent behavior. The fairy tale romance swiftly devolved into a nightmare of arguments, infidelity, and fear. Later, he married Mandy Smith, but this relationship too was marred by incessant conflicts and ultimately ended in divorce. His final significant relationship with Annette Walter-Lax was equally stormy, characterized by frequent public arguments and bitter disputes. These women, drawn to his charismatic energy and undeniable talent, found themselves trapped in a cycle of hope and despair, constantly trying to navigate the unpredictable currents of his self-destructive nature. Close friends recounted numerous instances where Moon, under the influence of drugs, instigated major altercations, sometimes even resorting to physical violence against loved ones and friends. Love with Moon was a high-stakes gamble, a dangerous game where passion, anger, and profound loneliness became inextricably intertwined, forming a suffocating trap. He was a man capable of great charm and affection, but his inner demons often transformed him into a destructive force, leaving behind a trail of emotional wreckage. Each broken relationship added another layer to his profound sense of isolation. Confronting the shadows, the self drowning in addiction. Keith Moon made multiple attempts to break free from the shackles of addiction, but each effort tragically failed. He was hospitalized numerous times due to drug overdoses, often narrowly escaping death. He was also frequently arrested by the police for disruptive behavior or drug possession, his legal troubles becoming a public spectacle. These were not private struggles, they were played out in the harsh glare of the public eye, turning his attempts at recovery into another chapter in his tragic narrative. One of the most severe incidents occurred in the early 70s, when Moon nearly lost his life after a heroin overdose. Doctors had to intervene swiftly to save him, a stark reminder of how close he teetered on the brink. Yet, instead of serving as a wake-up call, this brush with death merely propelled Moon back into his cycle of endless partying and drug abuse. It was as if he was immune to the consequences, or perhaps, simply beyond caring. He once confessed to friends that drugs were the only friend he felt he could truly rely on, a desperate admission of his profound isolation and dependence. Yet, paradoxically, these very friends were the relentless enemies that systematically ravaged every part of his being. It was a painful internal battle that Moon waged throughout his entire life. A constant tug-of-war between his desire to create and his compulsion to destroy. The drugs promised an escape from his anxieties and insecurities, but instead, they built an even larger prison around him, one from which he could not break free. His genius was in constant conflict with his demons, a tragic dance that ultimately led to his demise. A mysterious and devastating death by addiction. On September 7, 1978, Keith Moon passed away at the tragically young age of 32. The official cause cited as an overdose of hemynevrin, a drug prescribed to help him battle his alcohol addiction. His death sent shockwaves through the rock music world. A stark and chilling testament to the heavy price of a reckless lifestyle and pervasive addiction. It marked the end of an era, a final, thunderous cymbal crash that left the stage empty. The circumstances surrounding Moon's death remain a subject of considerable speculation and discussion. Several theories persist. Some believe it was a tragic accident, A fatal combination of heminephrin with other substances already present in his system, or simply a miscalculation of dosage by a troubled mind. Others, darker in their assessment, suggest he may have intentionally sought death in a moment of profound despair, a desperate act to escape the internal torment that plagued him. The lack of clarity only adds to the tragic mystique surrounding his demise, transforming his passing into a haunting puzzle. Regardless of the precise truth, Keith Moon's death left an immense void in the rock music world. His unique drumming style, his vibrant personality, and his explosive stage presence were irreplaceable. Simultaneously, his premature demise served as a grim warning about the irreversible destruction that addiction inflicts upon young, brilliant talents. He became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that even the most vibrant lights can be extinguished by the shadows they embrace. Musical legacy and a lesson for future generations. Keith Moon remains a profoundly influential drummer for generations of musicians who followed. Not only for his unique technical prowess but also for his deeply emotional and explosive performance style. His drumming wasn't just about rhythm, it was about injecting raw, untamed energy into every note, every beat. His music with The Who left an indelible mark on rock history, pioneering a sound that continues to inspire. His rhythmic complexity and his chaotic, yet controlled, power transformed the role of the drummer from a mere timekeeper to a central, dynamic force within the band. However, beyond his undeniable talent, Moon's life story also serves as a costly and poignant warning about the dark side of fame and the insidious traps of addiction. His life unfolds like a noir story, where the brilliant light of his talent was tragically consumed and overshadowed by the pervasive darkness of his self-destructive habits. He was a man who lived on the edge, a high-wire act without a net, and ultimately, he fell. His legacy is therefore dual-faceted, a celebration of a musical genius, and a somber reflection on the tragic consequences of a life lived without boundaries, where the pursuit of sensation ultimately led to an early demise. What aspects of Keith Moon's chaotic brilliance do you think were most influenced by his struggles with addiction, and conversely, what might have been lost if he had never walked that path? Graham Parsons, pioneer of country rock and a journey into addiction's mystery and drama. I.O. the musical odyssey and the entry into showbiz. Graham Parsons, born in 1946 as Cecil Ingram Parsons III, came into this world cloaked in the trappings of a wealthy, aristocratic Florida family. His lineage was a tangled web of privilege and profound domestic tragedy. His father, a prosperous businessman, was consumed by alcoholism, while his mother inherited an enormous fortune from the fruit empire. Despite possessing a material wealth that defied belief, complete with opulent mansions and a lifestyle of unimaginable extravagance, Parsons quickly turned his back on this gilded cage. He abandoned the silken embrace of his family's fortune to step into the gritty world of music, carrying a wild, audacious dream to transform traditional Southern folk songs into a fresh, vibrant, and utterly new material within rock music. This wasn't merely a career shift, it was an act of rebellion against destiny, a quest for deeper meaning beyond the towering stacks of dollars. His journey into this new world began not in the hallowed halls of academia at Harvard, where he briefly studied, but in the raw, unpolished musical performances that allowed him to quickly forge his unique style. The pivotal moment arrived when he joined the Byrds in 1968, a band already an icon of 60s rock. Blessed with innate talent and an unparalleled musical vision, Parsons swiftly became the creative and indispensable soul of the group, shaping their distinctive country rock sound. He infused the Byrds with a breath of fresh air, blending the rustic authenticity of country with the explosive energy of rock. With a voice uniquely blending sweet, deep tenderness and haunting melancholy, Parsons didn't just perform, he told stories, and each story ushered in a new era for both rock and country. He crafted a singular double-barreled sound, where classic melodies were reanimated, bridging two seemingly disparate musical worlds. The Bird's Sweetheart of the Rodeo, 1968, album, though not a commercial blockbuster at the time, emerged as a groundbreaking work, a foundational stone for the country rock genre, forever linking Graham Parsons' name to its very genesis. Yet, lurking beneath the dazzling spotlight of the stage and the mesmerizing notes, his personal life was already marred by deep, unhealed fractures, fissures that could not be concealed. From his very first tentative steps into the glamorous yet treacherous world of showbiz, Parsons began to succumb to darker pleasures, to deadly temptations, with drugs standing out as the most prominent. It was a tragedy waiting to explode, a curse hidden behind the dashing, bohemian exterior of a musical genius. He found in stimulants a temporary escape from the lingering pain of his family's past, from the inherent loneliness of a complex soul, and from the invisible pressures that came with his burgeoning fame. 2. The descent into shadows, from recreational to heroin. Graham Parsons' journey deeper into the abyss began rather innocuously, in the manner many addiction stories often do. Initially, he merely dabbled with substances like marijuana and amphetamines, using them for recreational purposes, to immerse himself in the endless parties and all-night gatherings with friends. This was, in part, a facet of the free and enlightened culture of the 60s, where the line between experimentation and outright abuse often blurred. But beneath that carefree exterior, the immense pressure of fame, a profound inner loneliness, and the deep-seated emotional scars from a turbulent childhood, marked by the tragic deaths of his father, mother, and brother, gradually propelled him towards heroin, an extremely dangerous and devastatingly destructive addictive substance that ravaged both body and mind. It was like a demon, whispering false promises of peace, of a world without pain, but in reality, it was a silent, relentless destroyer. According to numerous accounts from those who knew him, Parsons frequently sank into a listless, vacant state, sometimes for days, even weeks. The creative energy that once burned so brightly was now replaced by lethargy and disorientation. There were even times when he lost complete control, resorting to unacceptable violent behavior that made colleagues, friends, and even fans steer clear, recoiling in fear from a person they barely recognized. On one occasion, Parsons was reportedly caught fleeing a bar after a violent brawl with a group of strangers. The root cause deeply intertwined with the rampant effects of heroin and cocaine coursing through his veins, transforming him into an unrecognizable brute. These addiction-fueled episodes stripped a brilliant artist down to a mere shadow of his former self, a man no longer in command of his own actions or thoughts. This prolonged addiction not only impacted Parsons' personal life but also wreaked severe havoc on his burgeoning musical career. He was consistently late for rehearsals, undermining the necessary discipline of a professional band. His performances often lacked vitality, his eyes glazed over, his voice off-key, or worse, he'd cancel shows at the last minute, incurring significant damage to his reputation and financial standing. This not only affected his individual career but also plunged Parsons into unceasing, tense conflicts with his bandmates, who, despite their patience, eventually reached their limits. His irresponsibility fractured relationships with those who once loved and believed in him, leaving irreparable cracks. 3. Complex relationships and psychological instability. Parsons was inherently a deeply emotional person, a sensitive artistic soul, and as such, his relationships were riddled with drama, with emotional intensities that were almost unbelievable. He once shared a passionate yet tempestuous love affair with singer Emmylou Harris. This relationship was not merely a romantic entanglement but a truly magical musical collaboration. Emmylou Harris, with her angelic voice and remarkable patience, became his indispensable musical companion, helping to shape many of Parsons' most outstanding solo works. She tried her utmost to help him, to pull him from the mire of addiction, But it seemed the power of love was not enough to conquer the demons within him. However, Parsons also experienced numerous broken and strained relationships with other close figures in his life. Conflicts with members of the Byrds and later the Flying Burrito Brothers erupted frequently, primarily due to his unstable lifestyle and his increasingly deep reliance on drugs. He could become irritable, agitated, or completely irresponsible when under the influence of illicit substances, making him unbearable for those around him. Arguments, blame games, and a pervasive lack of trust destroyed significant relationships throughout his life. One particularly shocking incident, which sent tremors through the showbiz world at the time, occurred when Parsons was caught bringing heroin backstage at a major performance. Police conducted a surprise search and confiscated the drugs, sparking a major scandal that severely damaged the Byrds' reputation. This incident wasn't just a legal mishap. It was a public wake-up call about how deeply drugs had embedded themselves in Parsons' life. This played a significant role in his eventual push out of the Byrds, the very band he had helped shape, leaving him a wanderer, a black sheep in the music scene, struggling to find a stable place. He later formed the Flying Burrito Brothers, but his personal issues continued to plague him, preventing that band too from avoiding internal turmoil and eventually leading to its dissolution. 4. Encounters with the law. Drug-related arrests. Parsons' life was not confined to backstage troubles or internal band conflicts. He was also arrested numerous times by the police for possession and use of controlled substances, making him a regular at police stations and courtrooms. These incidents turned his name into hot property for the tabloids, and he consistently faced criminal charges, transforming the sensational newspaper pages into a relentless indictment of his spiraling decline. Each arrest further tarnished his reputation, an indelible stain that was difficult to wash away. On one particularly severe occasion, Parsons was discovered in an unconscious state due to a heroin overdose right in his hotel room, requiring immediate emergency medical attention. This event was thoroughly exploited by the press, with sensational headlines and shocking images, adding layers of infamy to his career and transforming him from a talented artist into a symbol of utter downfall. That near-death experience wasn't a wake-up call. It was simply another chapter in his self-destructive saga. More notably, Parsons was once accused of involvement in a major brawl at a nightclub, the origins of which stemmed from an argument related to drugs and alcohol. The chaos and violence permeating his personal life became an incessant topic of discussion in the entertainment industry, a dark story whispered from bar to bar. These incidents painted a vivid portrait of a man losing control, swept into a vortex of illicit substances and aggression. He was more than just an artist. He was an outlaw, living a wild life, defying all societal barriers and rules. The mysterious death and unanswered questions. On September 19, 1973, Graham Parsons died suddenly at a villa in Joshua Tree, California, at the tragically young age of 26, a cruel age that had already claimed many other musical geniuses. The official cause of death was announced as an overdose of morphine and methadone, drugs commonly used for heroin withdrawal or pain relief, indicating his persistent struggle with addiction. His death struck his fans and the music world like a bolt of lightning. However, his death quickly became one of Hollywood's greatest mysteries, a story whispered in the shadows of all-night parties. Some close friends and family, particularly those who had witnessed his tumultuous life, believed Parsons' death was not merely accidental. They raised suspicions that he might have been poisoned or left to die by hidden adversaries within the music industry, individuals who might have exploited his vulnerabilities or sought to eliminate him for complex reasons. Rumors of secret drug deals and dangerous associations added another layer of fog to his already tragic demise. And then, a truly bizarre and sensational story unfolded. shocking not only the media but also the funeral industry itself. Phil Kaufman, Parsons' close friend and unofficial road manager, undertook an incredibly audacious and seemingly insane act. He stole Parsons' body from Los Angeles International (LAX) airport, where it was being prepared for transport to Louisiana for burial according to his family's wishes. Kaufman and another friend then drove to the Joshua Tree Desert, Parsons' favorite spot, where he had once expressed a desire to be cremated. They illegally cremated Parsons' body in the desert, defying both the law and the vehement objections of his family. This act created a massive scandal, dragging on for years with incessant investigations and lawsuits. The incident cast an even darker and more mysterious veil over Parsons' death, transforming him into a symbol of rebellion even beyond the grave. The event played out like a dark play. A dramatic final scene for the already chaotic and tragic life of this talented yet ill-fated star. It forever linked Graham Parsons' name with the Joshua Tree Desert, a wild and enigmatic place where he found his final, albeit violent and unconventional, liberation. 6. Musical legacy and immortal influence. Despite a personal life riddled with turbulence and mercilessly ravaged by addiction, Graham Parsons left behind an indelible and eternal musical legacy. He is widely recognized as the father of country rock, a genre that revolutionized both country and rock music. His albums and songs, though not commercially successful at the time of their release, had a profound and far-reaching influence on countless artists who followed, becoming an endless source of inspiration for a new generation. He paved a new path for American music, proving that genre boundaries could be blurred to create something even more extraordinary. Emmylou Harris, his fated musical companion, played a crucial role in helping to disseminate Parsons' music and spirit to new generations of listeners. She tirelessly performed and recorded Parsons' works, ensuring that his musical flame never extinguished. Many major bands and world-renowned artists like the Rolling Stones, the Eagles, whose members were once part of Parsons' band, and Wilco were deeply influenced by Parsons' unique harmonic style and his authentic, emotionally charged approach to music. He was a musician's musician, deeply respected by his peers despite his troubled life. The story of Graham Parsons stands as a profoundly painful testament to the cost of fame, to the brutal temptations in the world of stars and the perilous showbiz landscape of the 60s and 70s. It was a life bright with talent but ultimately destroyed by drugs, fractured relationships, and a mysterious death, all combining to create an unforgettable, poignant noir tragedy, a haunting reminder of the dark side of success and the demons it can foster. His story lingers, a sad song from the desert, echoing eternally through music history. In the vast, sprawling canvas of 20th century music history, the celebrated singing stars of the 60s and 70s carved an indelible mark. They were musical icons, pioneers who shaped the very essence of rock, country, soul, and psychedelic genres. Their voices ignited generations, their melodies became anthems, and their stage presence commanded millions. Yet, behind the dazzling stage lights and the adulation of millions of fans, there lay a profound and tragic dark side, a harrowing narrative of drug dependence, relentless internal struggles, unhealing wounds, and ultimately, tragic deaths. From Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Graham Parsons, and David Crosby to Keith Moon, each represented a distinct, heartbreaking chapter, yet collectively, their stories offer invaluable lessons about life, about the intoxicating allure of fame, and about the very essence of the human condition. Their brilliance was undeniable, but so too was their fragility in the face of overwhelming forces. The perils of addiction, no path to redemption. First and foremost, the saga of these artists unequivocally demonstrates that reliance on drugs is never a path to salvation. Time and again, these tormented souls turned to addictive substances as a desperate means to soothe their inner pain, to escape the relentless pressures of their profession and their personal lives. Janis Joplin, with her scorching voice and rebellious spirit, harbored profound internal voids that she sought to fill with chemical solace. Jim Morrison, the enigmatic frontman of The Doors, with his eccentric style and profound philosophies, was also dragged into the swirling vortex of addiction and alcoholism, self-destructing in his misguided search for ultimate freedom. Graham Parsons and David Crosby, despite their extraordinary talent and musical vision, could not escape the debilitating clutches of heroin and cocaine, spending years battling their demons. Keith Moon, the explosive drummer of The Who, transformed his revelry into catastrophic self-sabotage, leaving a destructive legacy fueled by alcohol and drug binges. They paid a heavy price for those fleeting moments of oblivion, and tragically, many of them departed this world far too young, their lives extinguished before their time. These heartbreaking deaths were not merely a loss to music, they served as stark warnings to anyone contemplating a similar perilous path. They are monuments to the dangers of addiction, etched in the very fabric of rock and roll history, reminding us that even the greatest talents are vulnerable. Their premature exits deprived the world of countless future masterpieces and underscored the brutal, indiscriminate nature of substance abuse. The weight of fame, a psychological burden. Secondly, the dazzling spotlight of fame often carries psychological burdens that not everyone can endure. The relentless wave of public attention, the immense pressure to maintain an idealized image, the profound loneliness at the pinnacle of success all combine to create an overwhelming psychological strain. For many artists, drugs and alcohol became a temporary savior, a fleeting escape from the suffocating reality, but they proved to be a double-edged sword, slowly but surely consuming them from within. David Crosby once famously remarked that fame was a form of prison, and he admitted to being submerged by it on numerous occasions. His candidness revealed the dark truth behind the glittering facade. Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison similarly grappled with profound feelings of being misunderstood and isolated, even within the blinding glare of their own fame. The roar of the crowd could not fill the emptiness within, and the adoration of millions often intensified their sense of alienation. Their public personas often clashed with their private turmoil, leading to an unsustainable internal conflict that sought desperate relief. The critical role of environment, support and sabotage. Thirdly, the surrounding environment plays a decisive role in both the progression of addiction and the potential for recovery. The people closest to these artists, friends, bandmates, family members, could either be a lifeline or unwitting companions pulling them deeper into the abyss. Graham Parsons was tragically abandoned multiple times by those around him precisely when he was most in need of help, left to face his demons alone. Keith Moon constantly generated scandals due to his chaotic relationships, a reflection of the destructive influence of his inner circle and his inability to foster stable connections. And David Crosby experienced severe downfalls due to the temptations offered by some of his own bandmates, highlighting how even those closest to you can inadvertently contribute to the cycle of addiction. This painful reality underscores the critical importance of a robust support system, family, friends, and trusted loved ones in helping those struggling with addiction find their way back to the light and inner peace. Without a steady hand to guide them, without unwavering empathy and intervention, the path back from the brink often remains elusive. Their stories serve as a potent reminder that recovery is rarely a solitary journey, it demands a collective effort. A circle of care that can withstand the destructive force of the disease. Health over success, a lesson in priorities. Fourthly, the lives of these stars starkly illustrate the absolute necessity of prioritizing mental and physical health above all else, even fame and success. Many of them tragically sacrificed their lives for fleeting moments of transcendence on stage, or perhaps, for the illusion of it. Jim Morrison, a poet with a vast and visionary mind, was pulled into the darkness, Janis Joplin was the burning voice of a generation, a raw force of nature, yet profoundly vulnerable. Keith Moon was a masterful drummer with an unparalleled, explosive performance style. Yet, in the end, all of them were ultimately brought down by the very demons within their own souls. The biggest lesson here is profound. Success does not grant immunity from psychological crises or the insidious grip of addiction. If one fails to nurture oneself, to seek help at the right moment, the dazzling glow of fame will quickly extinguish. Their lives serve as a poignant cautionary tale that no amount of adulation or artistic achievement can compensate for a fractured mind or a ravaged body. It's a stark reminder that true wealth lies in well-being, not accolades. The imperative of self-understanding, healing the inner wounds. Fifthly, the lives of these stars reveal the crucial need for self-confrontation and profound self-understanding. They were all individuals of complex inner depth, brimming with emotions and hidden wounds. Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison, despite their outspoken and explosive public personas, were at heart lonely souls, yearning to be truly understood. Their outward rebellion often masked deep-seated insecurities. Graham Parsons, whose career was tragically derailed, was perpetually searching for meaning and redemption through his music. A poignant quest for wholeness. David Crosby and Keith Moon, in their own tumultuous ways, stand as testament to the undeniable truth that no one is immune to human frailty, no matter their talent or celebrity. This is precisely why psychological support, the healing of emotional traumas, and the cultivation of strong personal values are paramount in preventing the severe repercussions of addiction. Understanding oneself, acknowledging vulnerabilities, and seeking professional help for underlying issues are not weaknesses but essential acts of self-preservation. It's a journey into the self, often painful but necessary, to build the resilience needed to withstand the pressures of life. Social responsibility, protecting artistic talent. Finally, their stories also serve as a powerful reminder to society and the entertainment industry about their inherent responsibility to care for artists. Fame should not be a gateway to unchecked psychological problems or health crises. It can be a double-edged sword if not managed responsibly. Providing psychological support, implementing addiction prevention programs, and fostering healthy, accountable working environments are crucial elements in protecting the talent and lives of artists. The industry has a moral imperative to safeguard the very individuals who bring so much joy and inspiration to the world. With the growing awareness of mental health in today's world, the lessons gleaned from this past era are more valuable than ever. Artists today are increasingly encouraged to open up, seek help when needed, and prioritize their mental well-being above all else. This cultural shift, though slow, offers a glimmer of hope that the tragic patterns of the past might be broken. The journeys of Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Graham Parsons, David Crosby, and Keith Moon are tragic yet undeniably inspiring pieces of world music history. They teach us that talent and fame are merely the tip of the iceberg. What matters most is the ability to cherish one's health, to seek balance in life, and to forgive oneself for past missteps. If we fail to learn from their mistakes, we risk falling into the same vicious cycle of temptations and self-inflicted wounds. But if we choose to look deeply, to truly value life, to care for ourselves and those around us, then light will always persist, even in the darkest shadows. And so, the stories of these legends are not merely somber chapters in music history. They are invaluable messages for anyone grappling with difficulties and challenges in life. Do not allow the waves of addiction to sweep away your dreams and your inner light. Learn to cherish yourself, and always seek help when necessary. Their lives, though cut short, offer a beacon of hope and a profound reminder of the enduring human spirit.